Chris Lynch and Canterbury Mornings. Entertaining, informing and fighting for Canterbury. Weekday mornings on Newstalk ZB.
Well, let me now talk to the latest political dealings when it comes to Judith Collins. In some ways, as I was saying to you off air, guys, I was absolutely vilified for even mentioning Judith Collins and her resignation over the weekend. For better or worse, though, Sam, this was a genuine news story, wasn't it? Regardless of the fact that you're a National supporter, we cannot deny that this does look like a bad look for National, doesn't it? Look, so close to an election.
Look, I actually don't think it does. I think, to be perfectly honest, the PM is a fair man. He's been presented with the facts. He's had a discussion with his minister, and as a result of that, the minister has chosen to resign. There'll be an inquiry, obviously, but look, I mean, New Zealanders are focused on the issues that matter, and I think the PM is really focused on that as well. So I'm not overly worried.
Kia, what do you see in this? From a Labour point of view.
If a senior minister undermining the head of the SFO when they're investigating failed finance companies isn't an issue that matters to New Zealanders, I want to know what is. I think that the PM has to have a full inquiry, a whitewash that doesn't go into Cameron Slater's dealings with paid lobbyists for Mark Hodgson. That's not a full inquiry. And I don't know if the PM's got the guts to do it this close to an election. And I think he has to stand up and be Prime Ministerial.
The PM is doing that, Chris, with all due respect. I think you'll see today an announcement around sort of the parameters of that inquiry. So, look, he's focused on the issues that matter. He's been presented with information and he's dealt with it. So I'm reasonably comfortable with it.
Michael, from the Young Greens point of view, what do you see in this? Is this a storm in a teacup, or do you think this is an incredibly important issue given we are only 2 weeks out from the general election?
I think this is an issue that goes right to the heart of our democracy, and if the Prime Minister is not willing to give a full and independent inquiry, which from my understanding he's not, he's limiting the parameters already and willing to identify the person to head up the inquiry himself. He's not willing to work with the Labour leader on this issue.
Chris, with all due respect, that would be making it a political issue. So he's basically said that there'll be a full inquiry. It'll be reasonably independent, and I think we need to leave it at that and move on to the policy and the things that matter to New Zealanders for the next couple of weeks, so they can make an informed decision. I don't think we need to get bogged down in this. He's dealt with it. I think we should move on.
Well, let's talk about policy. And I think that's a fair comment, because yesterday people were saying, forget the Judith Collins scandal, we want to know the policies. But I guess some people who were saying that already probably had made up their minds, to be fair. That's what I'm getting. So they wanted to deflect the issue. But however, I guess a distinction that can be made between, for example, the Greens and National and Labour, for that matter, is Christchurch's housing crisis. There are two very distinctive different policies. Labour wants to build over 100,000 homes in 10 years. National wants to throw more cash at first home buyers. Let me bring in Michael from the Greens here. What is the best solution? Do you think it's a mix of both, or do you think both measures won't work?
The Greens are supportive of Labour's Kiwi Build policy.
Now that's a surprise.
Yeah.
No surprise there, obviously. But I think throwing money at the issue is not going to fix it. The issue is the unaffordability of housing in the first place. Young homeowners, whether they're given a bit more cash or not, are not able to afford this. They're barely able to afford rent in Christchurch right now, let alone save for a house. You
see, Labour's policy sounds well intended. The trouble is, every time I asked the spokesperson for housing, how are you going to find the builders or tradespeople? There isn't much of a response. So it's all very well to pluck these numbers out of the air, but I'm still wanting to hear the detail about where we're going to find those tradespeople. So, Keir, from Young Labour's point of view, what do you say to that?
Well, the first thing to say is that National doesn't have a policy for the housing crisis in Christchurch.
That's not true.
According to National, there is no housing crisis in Christchurch. And I have to say, that's the line that Jerry Brownlee takes, that's the line the PM takes, and it's nonsense. There is a housing crisis, and we have to do something about it. The thing is that what Labour is saying is we'll train people up to build those houses. We're saying that we'll invest millions of dollars in building apprenticeships, building up an economic growth that's based around giving jobs to young people, working in New Zealand, learning in New Zealand, building houses for New Zealanders.
Sam McDonald, that's a good point, though. From Young Nat's point of view, though, do you accept there is a housing crisis in this city? And Jerry Brownlee says a crisis is something that requires immediate attention. don't we require immediate attention?
Can I firstly start by saying I think it's ironic that Labour and the Greens say that throwing cash at an issue is not the way to go, because they do that with every issue in my view. What we've said is that, in all seriousness, I think
that's a fair point.
Yeah.
It does sound like every policy you have, it's more cash. But anyway.
The biggest issue with housing is the supply of land, okay, and also and the supply of the actual property. So what we've seen is the announcement recently, which allows first home buyers to get basically get on the ladder, get on the housing ladder. What I think you'll find over the next wee while is that housing companies and everyone like that says, okay, we've got these parameters to work within, and Christchurch is up to $450,000. They'll go away, they'll put together packages which allow a lot more. You've got to remember that since 2012, we've had nearly 11,000, well, just over 11,000 residential consents issued after the earthquake. It's still going to take a couple of years to get back to pre-earthquake levels, but we're certainly on our way, and I wouldn't be getting as worked up as they are over it.
But I was talking...
Saying that we're on our way is enough. Saying we're on our way, we're going to leave it to the market.
But are you going to train people overnight? Are you going to train people overnight? How does that work?
Are you saying that you're going to go out to people living on the street, sleeping on couches and say, it's okay, consents are happening, we're on the way, we'll leave it to the market? I don't think that's enough. The government has a responsibility to almost vulnerable. Are you actually going to train
people overnight?
No, of course not.
Exactly, so you're not going to fix it overnight.
What they're saying that your solution isn't overnight either. Your solution is even further away. You're saying, leave it to the market. Hands off.
Can we all agree, though, at the end of the day, there is no quick fix solution to this, and both political parties from either spectrum don't really have the answers. Now, I was talking to a housing expert, Hugh Pavlitich, and journalist David Killick on CTV the other night. They both were highly critical of both policies from the left and right, suggesting they don't go fast enough, they don't move soon enough, and they are time wasting. Now, one thing that came up during the discussion on CTV, Sam McDonald, was the fact that Labour's policy sounds well intended to throw more cash at first-time home buyers, but that doesn't give any incentive for developers to decrease the price of their supplies, for example, the cost of house. So while you're giving more money to first-time home buyers, if I'm, for argument's sake, David Reid or somebody, what incentive have I got to go, right, I'm now going to decrease my price? Aren't I going to say, fantastic, there are more people with more cash in their hands, I can build more houses, but there's still no active incentive across the industry to lower the prices in the first place?
I think, Chris, fundamentally the market will correct that in all seriousness. So you'll either go to David Reid or you go to another housing company. They're not all going to be priced exactly the same, but I think people can make a choice.
The point Pavlich is making is the National Party is saying, here's, you want to buy a new house, here's an extra $20,000. All that does is it inflates the housing market. It's just throwing more fuel onto the fire.
What inflates the housing market is a lack of supply. So what the government have said is that they're going to increase that supply throughout Christchurch and throughout the country, in areas like Auckland, and I think we're seeing that.
Well, what's important is not increasing the supply, but doing it efficiently. And currently, what we're doing is building out onto the plains and creating an unsustainable system for our city.
Michael, from the Young Greens, that's a point you make. I mean, the Greens would encourage this concept of sustainability and compact living, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
But having said that, though, doesn't that simply push the price up in the middle because we're restricting the land supply to, say, the central areas of Christchurch, and therefore you push up the price in the middle? And restricting land is actually not the best. When you strangle land, you have prices in the middle that get pushed up. Do you agree with that sentiment, or is that not right?
No, that's not correct. It's about building intensively within the city space that we have. What's happening already with National's policy is the central city, the price is increasing dramatically because they're creating the so-called green belt, which is really just a belt of grass for them to inflate the prices on the land that they've forcefully purchased within the city centre, while forcing the rest of the public to buy houses out on the middle of the plains that they'll then have to pay for commuting into the city with.
Sam McDonald from Young Nats, I'll give you the last word on that.
Look, I think that we've got a good plan in place, to be perfectly honest. We're going to focus on supply, we're going to give people the choice to build new homes, and we're working towards that. I'm reasonably comfortable with where we're going, and I think New Zealand is.
So, we all know that the stadium is a huge cost and a huge burden placed on the ratepayers of Christchurch and the council. And if we can delay that, along with some of the other projects, you'll find that the council's books will be much better, and we'll be able to use our current assets to pay off debt in the future rather than selling them now for pittance.
Sam McDonald from Young Nats, isn't this more about the fact that we just don't know how much insurance payouts we're going to get from Civic Assurance, and that is one of the main issues here. Until we know exactly how much we're going to get from insurance companies, we can't possibly make any real rational decisions, can we?
Well, look, I think it's first important to understand that Cameron Partners have taken a sort of full look at everything, and they've opened the books for the community. So, look, I actually have confidence in the Christchurch City Council to have that discussion with ratepayers. I think the government have never backed away from Christchurch. You know, John Key is down here almost weekly. Jerry Brownlee is an incredibly strong minister for our region. And I think what you've also got to consider is that the government haven't walked away. You know, we've got the horizontal infrastructure stuff to look at later this year, and they haven't ruled out funding anything more. So, look, I'm confident that the Christchurch Council can talk to us as ratepayers and have that discussion.
Keir from Young Labour, what do you see in this?
Well, the fundamental issue is that the council is being squeezed by the government. I think there's a government agenda to force the council to sell assets.
I don't think that's
the government has
if
never.
If that's the case, though, what's in it for the government, though?
Well, let's be honest. The government doesn't. The government has an ideological case for asset sales. I actually think that the after the next election, the new government needs to sit down, and the new Labour Greens government needs to sit down and go back through with the council and say, how can we make the funding work? How can we do it where we don't buy convention centres, roofed stadiums? We don't need those things. How can we do it?
I mean, I actually have confidence in the ratepayers of Christchurch to make that decision. Leanne Dalzell, as mayor, you know, she's not certainly a National Party member by any stretch of the imagination, but she said she's going to go to the public along with her councillors and let them make that decision between them.
The difficulty I have with things, the difficulty I have with things like the convention centre, while they seem great and you know the private sector goes on about how important they are, what I would hate to think is the ownership goes in the hands of the Christchurch City Council, where we're effectively propping up a white elephant that economically doesn't really stand up in terms of making money, nor was there ever a business case to rate and taxpayers of this country to say this is why we need this because it's going to make money. How do you reconcile with that, Sam from Young Nats?
Well, look, I think, to be perfectly honest, the council needs to look at how they operate as an organisation. You know, they're not in the business of making money. They're in the business of providing services to the community. So they need to have a think about that. But like I say, I have confidence that ratepayers will make an informed decision about what they want to do. If they should. It's their ratepayer money.
If the council isn't in the business of making money, why is the council being saddled with the convention centre, the stadium, these big, grandiose, money-spinning ideas? Even Eric Crampton, who's he's no left-winger, he thinks that these are a waste of money and that the government should sit down, rethink them, and go back to the council and try and bring costs down.
Eric Crampton, a widely respected economist, did say his most concern or one of his major concerns was the economic analysis, the business case. There was none. We still haven't seen that for any of the anchor projects. Sam from Young Nats, what do you say to that?
Well, look, to be perfectly honest, I actually don't have that information to hand right now. But
no one has the information. That's a problem.
What I would say, though, is that I actually trust ratepayers to make an informed decision. I have complete confidence in the political leadership of the council to go out to its community and say, this is what we want to do. Join us.
The next problem, though, is that it's not up to the council. No. These big anchor projects come straight from Sarah. They come from Jerry Brownlee's desk. Leanne can do what she wants. The council can do what they want. Ratepayers can do what they want, but Jerry still has the final say. And if he's not willing to come up with business cases, with reasoned economic analysis, the ratepayers can't have the information. They can't make those decisions. And if he's not willing to listen, then we're going to end up with a convention centre and a stadium. Lay the one down in Dunedin, which just loses money.
Can we go back to the main point, though, that, I mean, there has been a lot of change here in the last couple of years. If we didn't have strong and decisive leadership like Jerry Brownlee and John Key, I don't think Christchurch would be where it is today. You know, if you take it that we have the Labour Greens in government next time, who will make the decisions for Christchurch? Is it going to be 7 Green cabinet ministers, or is it going to be 13 Labour ministers? We have to be really practical and say that John Key and Jerry Brownlee have led Christchurch incredibly well.
Well, let me ask Michael from the Young Greens that question. Is that a fair point? Because I know that some commentators, both on the left and the right, are suggesting that Christchurch voters have got some very serious issues to contend with, and that simply a change of government isn't going to really change the course of Christchurch's future straight away. And there is the argument made, if we have a change of government, could that potentially put Christchurch on the back burner even more? When we have a government that is just starting to get things happening, we are starting to see slightly more action happening in terms of the rebuild of Christchurch. Michael from the Young Greens, what do you say to that?
Well, In terms of the Greens, we've been incredibly supportive. We have our MPs working hard here in Christchurch, Mojo Mathers and Eugenie Sage, to ensure that our city is vibrant in the future. I think a change in government will ensure that there's more focus placed on Christchurch and its needs.
Is there a sense, though, is there a danger, do you think, though, Keir, that a change of government could actually backfire on Christchurch, or is that just political posturing?
I think that's scaremongering. I think it's the lowest kind of scaremongering to say that a change of government could put Christchurch at risk. I'm sure everyone in New Zealand, every politician, every minister will put Christchurch at the front. The difference is that Labour has a different plan. We're not saying that National doesn't care. What we're saying is that Labour has a different plan, and with the Greens, we're able to go back through, take a fresh look at some of the problems we're facing, and we're trying to put in place long-term solutions that are sustainable and aren't based around short-term pie-in-the-sky thinking, like a convention centre. And that's not a solution for Christchurch.
And Michael from the Young Greens, go ahead.
Sam's right that the council needs to make decisions and that the ratepayers should be respected, and what that requires is Sarah to be wound up and for elected members of our community to make those decisions, not some government department.
We've just got under a minute left. In terms of Sarah, then, what should happen to Sarah? I mean, should it stay? Should it go? Is it even required? Sam McDonald from Young Nats.
Look, to be perfectly honest, I think there will be some legislative needs that are required in Christchurch, in all seriousness going forward. But I think we're yet to have that discussion.
Michael Tennant from Young Greens.
I think Sarah needs to be wound up. The Greens have made it clear that it was an emergency piece of legislation that is no longer required. We're in recovery, and that recovery should be led by our local government.
And Keir Leslie from Young Labour, your thoughts on Sarah?
It's not just about bringing democracy back at Sarah, it's about bringing democracy back at ECAN. We need to have a fully democratic Canterbury. We need to get away from this model of the government coming in and telling Cantabrians how they're going to say it's going to be run.
We're simply out of time. Really appreciate your time this morning. I think we should have this discussion again before the elections. Sam McDonald from Young Nats, Keir Leslie, Young Labour, and Michael Tennant from Young Greens. Really nice of you to come in and appreciate your time.
Great, thanks very much.
To have a different young youth voice right here at Newstalk ZB.